this tutorial will be for doing a background of an art journal page, somewhat like this. We are going to be doing self-portraits later on in the class, so this art journal page background and assignment will be focused on the idea of self-identity and kind of expressing who you are, even if it's not through an actual drawing of a person, which is typically what you would think of as a self-portrait. So to get this started, I'm just going to turn to a blank page, and I'll actually leave a blank one so that we don't kind of accidentally mess up the page before this. The first thing I'm going to do, the first thing in your instructions, will be to take a white oil pastel, and you're going to write about yourself. You're going to write a description of yourself as if you were a character in a book. So we're going to use a white oil pastel, and that will resist the watercolor wash that we'll do later. You can also do this with other colors. It's just more dramatic with the white. So I'll start this out with another light color, which is also somewhat dramatic, just to kind of show you how this works. So you could go back and forth, but definitely try the white. When you're starting your description, you may want to start with just basic things, what you look like, but then try to get into some more exploration of who you are inside, who you are as a person. So just switching to my white oil pastel. Oh, and by the way, I did stop the video a second when I realized I made a mistake, and I did just erase some of my oil pastel and rewrite. So you'd be surprised you can actually erase with oil pastel. Just get yourself sort of a dirty eraser, and then only use that for dirty materials. Don't try to then use that with graphite. Okay, so I'm gonna just stop the video, finish this up off camera. You get the idea. Okay, so I finished writing. I only wrote about to here, so you don't have to necessarily fill all the space. You can if you want to. And don't worry about whether we can read it or not. It can actually look great even if you can't read it at all. It's really more for yourself. So since I do have a little bit of extra space here, I'm going to combine some different things. So I mentioned in the last video that you can use paper to create some texture rubbing. So here I've just done a snowflake. So I'm just going to add in here that the material I'm using right now to do the snowflake rubbing is a crayon that's just been peeled. So when we started writing, we were using oil pastel, but if you do choose to add a texture rubbing, make sure that you switch to using a crayon. The oil pastel really is just too soft to do a good texture rubbing. Crayons work well, yeah, and they'll also resist the watercolor. Add that as well. So, and we already know that crayon wax also resists the watercolor. So all of this will be resist. And you can kind of fade this out, kind of create a gradation here to kind of create a smoother transition if you'd like. And maybe I'll even do more of this a little bit over here too, just to unify the pages. We'll just see how that looks. All right, I'll finish this up off camera because you get the idea. So this is just my crayon that I've peeled. Do use a crayon rather than oil pastel. If you're trying to use oil pastel with this, it really does not work as well. Okay, to finish this up, I've got my watercolor and I've got my large brush. And I also have a spray bottle as well, so just to add a little bit of extra fun. So as always, I recommend by starting by mixing some colors. This is your palette. If you want to clean this off first, you would just wet it and just wipe it down, but I actually like sort of this sort of muddy, interesting color. You may also want to wet your watercolors either with your spray bottle or just a clean brush in each one to activate them. I did that earlier, so they're already nice and goopy, and I'm going to get really bright, lovely colors with them. And as always, try mixing your colors. Try, even mixing some complementaries to get some sort of surprising colors. Before I touch this to the paper, I'm going to just clean it off, and then I'm just going to go over everything with just plain water. So you can see already the resist happening because my brush still had a little bit of paint on it. But really the idea here is you're just using plain water for your watercolor wash. So you can see that we've got those words starting to appear. I'm going to actually do this wash across the whole 2-page spread, although actually I'll come back to this side. So I would actually, just because of drying, I would probably wait and do this one separately. But then from there, I'm just going to start adding my color. You can add it, in spots as well as sort of all over. We have this color that we mixed, but you can also mix color on here. Sometimes you'll get much more dramatic mixing on here, which is why I say always mix on your palette first, so you can really get some brand new colors. When you tend to add them here, you kind of see that color still in there. It's not really mixing as much. So, but I definitely recommend doing both. You don't want to do everything on your palette and never do any mixing on the page, and you also don't want to do the opposite where you're never actually mixing in your palette. So do both for maximum effect. All right, so you may not want to use every color. You may want to keep a somewhat limited color palette. Otherwise, things can get sort of overwhelming. Do this area down here with your crayon as well, and then keep going over here. Notice I am being kind of loose, so you can get some cool spots with water. You can get some cool spots with paint. If you're kind of flicking the paint around, that can actually be great. So again, my brush is pretty much clean now, just doing the water first for our watercolor wash. Watch out if you've got a person sitting next to you that you don't splash them too much, or your computer, maybe try to move that as far from you as you can. And then again, you're just continuing. I want to use at least some of the same colors for a sense of unity. If it gets too dark and you can't see the words, it doesn't really matter. You want to be able to see them, of course, somewhat. But if that bothers you, you just have your paper towel. You can wipe that up a little bit. And in general, you do have to make sure that you press pretty hard. Otherwise, the resist won't work. So if you're just using a really light touch, you'll be disappointed the resist won't work. So if you're doing this and your resist isn't working, go back, start again on a new page, do your oil pastel darker, and then you'll be golden. So darker, meaning you're pressing harder. You won't actually see it since it's white. All right, and so just finishing this up, kind of playing maybe with the color, again, using some of these same colors, flicking, mixing color on the page. And then finally I have my spray bottle, so you can create some more cool effects. The effects you get will change by how you adjust the nozzle here. So if you have it kind of so it really has sort of a strong spray, it's going to really move the paint around a little bit more. So that's what I would recommend. Again, watch out for spattering. You can also use your paper towel to create some extra texture, as well as mop up excess water or color. So have fun with this. Some of this, if you let it dry a little bit more, you'll be able to kind of do more splatter on top, and it'll kind of stay, and do a little bit more with, I've almost had this oversaturated, so you might be able to get more texture to show if it's not quite so wet. All right, that's pretty much it. Have fun with this. Keep going, splatter, do whatever. Yeah, that's your basic background. So just getting one last look at this, trying to get this a little bit more in focus for you guys. There you go. And then once you're ready, you will carefully take this to the drying rack and let that dry.